Small daily convenience costs don't feel like a big deal in the moment. That's exactly why they're so dangerous. You're not walking into a store and dropping a $1,000 at once, so it never triggers that internal alarm that tells you to slow down. Instead, it's $15 here, $22 there, maybe $30 on a slightly longer ride, and each time it feels justified. You're tired, you're in a rush, you don't want to deal with waiting, or maybe you just want a little comfort after a long day. In isolation, every single decision makes sense. But money doesn't operate in isolation. It operates in patterns, and those patterns are what determine your financial outcome over time. When you start stacking those small expenses day after day, they compound in the opposite direction of investing. Instead of your money working for you, it's consistently leaving your account without giving you anything lasting in return. A ride that lasts 20 minutes is gone the second you step out of the car, but the money you spent on it is gone permanently. Multiply that by multiple rides per week, then per month, and suddenly you're looking at hundreds of dollars. Stretch that across a year, and it turns into thousands. What felt like harmless convenience becomes a major financial drain that you didn't even notice building up. The reason this happens so easily is because convenience is incredibly persuasive. It removes friction from your life, and humans are naturally wired to avoid friction. If there's an easier option available, most people will take it without thinking twice. Apps are designed to make spending as effortless as possible. You don't see physical cash leaving your hand, you don't feel the weight of the purchase, you just tap a button and it's done. That disconnect makes it easier to ignore the cumulative impact of your choices because there's no immediate consequence. You still get where you need to go, you still feel fine in the moment, and nothing seems wrong. But the trade-off is happening quietly in the background. Every dollar you spend on convenience is a dollar that could have been used to improve your financial position. That might mean building an emergency fund, paying off debt, or investing for the future. When those dollars are consistently redirected toward short-term comfort, you're essentially choosing present ease over future stability without realizing it, and the more you repeat that choice, the more it shapes your financial reality. Another issue is that these habits become normalized very quickly. What starts as an occasional treat becomes your default behavior. At first, maybe you only take a ride when you're running late or when public transportation isn't available. Then it turns into taking rides because it's faster. Then it becomes taking rides because it's easier. Eventually, you stop questioning it altogether. It becomes part of your routine, something you expect rather than something you evaluate. And once a habit reaches that point, it's no longer a conscious decision, it's automatic. The problem with automatic spending is that it removes intentionality. You're no longer deciding if something is worth it, you're just doing it because it's what you always do. That's where the real damage happens because there's no pause to consider the long-term effect. You don't think about how much you've spent this week, this month, or this year. You don't think about what that money could have become if it had been saved or invested. You're only focused on solving the immediate need in front of you. What makes this even more impactful is the opportunity cost. Every small purchase carries an invisible price tag that goes beyond the amount you see. It's not just the $20 ride, it's what that $20 could have turned into over time. If you consistently invested that same amount instead of spending it, the growth could be substantial. Over years, even modest contributions can compound into significant sums. But when that money is spent instead, that potential disappears completely. You're not just losing money in the present, you're losing what that money could have become in the future. This is where people often underestimate the impact of their daily decisions. They think that only big financial moves matter, like getting a higher paying job or making a large investment. While those things are important, the smaller, repeated actions are just as powerful because of their consistency. A single large expense might set you back temporarily, but daily spending habits shape your financial trajectory over the long term. If those habits are working against you, it becomes extremely difficult to make progress no matter how much you earn. It also creates a cycle that's hard to break. When a large portion of your income is going toward convenience, you have less money available for everything else. That can lead to stress, tighter budgets, and fewer options. But instead of addressing the root cause, many people continue the same habits because they've become accustomed to them. They might try to cut back in other areas like food or entertainment without realizing that the biggest issue is still sitting there unchanged. Without addressing the primary source of unnecessary spending, progress feels slow or non-existent. There's also a psychological element to this. Convenient spending often feels like a reward. After working hard, it feels justified to make life a little easier, to avoid discomfort, or to save time. That mindset reinforces the behavior because it associates spending with relief or satisfaction. Over time, it becomes a coping mechanism rather than a conscious choice. And once spending is tied to emotion, it becomes much harder to control because you're not just dealing with numbers, you're dealing with habits and feelings. The key shift happens when you start paying attention. When you actually track how much you're spending on these small conveniences, it changes your perspective. Numbers that once felt insignificant suddenly become real. Seeing the monthly total, then the yearly total, forces you to confront the true impact of your habits. It's no longer abstract, it's concrete. And that awareness creates the opportunity to make different decisions. Even small adjustments can make a noticeable difference. Reducing how often you rely on convenience doesn't mean eliminating it completely. It means using it intentionally rather than automatically. Choosing alternatives when possible, planning ahead to avoid unnecessary expenses, and being mindful of when the cost outweighs the benefit. Those small changes don't just save money, they rebuild your sense of control over your finances. Over time, that control compounds just like money does. The more intentional you become, the more aligned your spending is with your goals. Instead of money slipping away unnoticed, it starts working in your favor. And the same way small expenses added up to create a problem, small improvements begin to add up to create progress. Awareness is where everything starts, but most people skip it because it feels uncomfortable. It's much easier to go through your day spending money without thinking too deeply about it than it is to sit down and actually face the numbers. But the moment you do, things begin to change. You start to see patterns you didn't notice before. You realize where your money is going, how often you're spending, and what habits are quietly shaping your financial situation. That clarity is powerful because you can't fix what you don't see. And for most people, the problem isn't a lack of income, it's a lack of awareness around how that income is being used. When you take a closer look, you'll often find that a large portion of your spending is tied to habits rather than necessity. These are the automatic decisions you make throughout the day without questioning them. It might be ordering food instead of cooking, taking a ride instead of planning ahead, or buying something small just because it feels convenient in the moment. Each of these actions seems insignificant on its own, but when repeated consistently, they create a noticeable impact. The issue isn't that these choices exist, it's that they happen without intention. That's where small habit changes come in. The idea isn't to completely overhaul your life overnight or cut out every expense that brings you comfort. That approach usually fails because it's too extreme and difficult to maintain. Instead, the focus is on making slight adjustments that are realistic and sustainable. It's about identifying one or two areas where you can improve and gradually shifting your behavior in those areas. These changes might feel minor at first, but their impact grows over time because of consistency. For example, if you recognize that you're spending a significant amount on convenience, the goal isn't to eliminate it entirely, it's to reduce it in a way that still fits your lifestyle. Maybe you choose specific days where you avoid unnecessary spending, or set a limit for how much you're willing to spend each week. That simple boundary introduces structure where there was none before. It forces you to think before you act, and that pause is often enough to change your decision. As you begin to make these adjustments, something interesting happens. You start to regain control. Instead of feeling like your money is disappearing without explanation, you understand exactly where it's going and why. That sense of control reduces stress because you're no longer guessing or hoping things will work out. You're actively shaping your financial situation through your choices. Even if the progress is slow at first, it's still progress, and that momentum builds over time. One of the biggest benefits of small habit changes is that they're easier to stick with. Large, drastic changes often rely on motivation, and motivation is inconsistent. Some days you feel disciplined, other days you don't, but small changes rely more on routine than motivation. Once they become part of your daily behavior, they require less effort to maintain, they become automatic in the same way your old habits were, but now they're working in your favor instead of against you. This is where the long-term impact really begins to show. When you consistently save even a small amount of money, it starts to accumulate. At first, the difference might not feel significant. You might only see a few extra dollars in your account at the end of the week. But over months, that grows into hundreds, then thousands. And if that money is invested, it has the potential to grow even further. The key is that it all starts with those initial adjustments. Without them, there's nothing to build on. Another important aspect is the shift in mindset. When you become more aware of your spending, you naturally start to evaluate your decisions differently. Instead of focusing on whether you can afford something in the moment, you begin to consider its long-term value. You ask yourself if the purchase aligns with your goals or if it's just a temporary convenience. That change in thinking doesn't just affect one area of your life, it influences all of your financial decisions. You also become more intentional about where your money goes. Rather than spending impulsively, you start prioritizing what matters most to you. That might mean saving for a specific goal, investing for the future, or simply creating a financial cushion that gives you more flexibility. Whatever the goal is, your spending begins to reflect it. And when your actions align with your priorities, you feel more confident in your decisions because they're purposeful rather than reactive. There's also a sense of empowerment that comes with this process. When you realize that small changes can lead to meaningful results, it shifts your perspective on what's possible. You no longer feel stuck or limited by your current situation because you can see a path forward. Each positive change reinforces the idea that your actions matter. And that belief encourages you to keep improving. It creates a feedback loop where progress leads to motivation, and motivation leads to more progress. At the same time, it's important to recognize that setbacks will happen. There will be moments where you fall back into old habits or make decisions that don't align with your goals. That's part of the process. The difference is that with awareness, those moments don't go unnoticed. You can identify what happened, understand why it happened, and adjust moving forward. Instead of derailing your progress completely, setbacks become opportunities to learn and refine your approach. Consistency is what ultimately determines the outcome. It's not about being perfect every day, it's about being better most days. Small improvements repeated over time create a significant difference. The gap between where you are and where you want to be is often filled with these incremental changes. They may not feel exciting or dramatic, but they are effective because they are sustainable. As these habits solidify, they start to influence other areas of your life as well. Financial discipline often carries over into time management, productivity, and goal setting. The skills you develop by managing your money more effectively can be applied in different contexts, creating a broader sense of control and direction. What begins as a simple effort to reduce unnecessary spending can evolve into a more structured and intentional way of living. Over time, the results become more visible. You might notice that you have more savings than before, less financial stress, and greater flexibility in your decisions. Opportunities that once felt out of reach may start to feel attainable because you've built a foundation that supports them. All of this stems from the initial decision to become more aware and to make small, consistent changes that align with your long-term goals.